Coming up on The Buck Stops Here.
And despite billions of dollars in enterprise investment, the positive return on investment for small and medium businesses, in particular using AI, is currently hovering somewhere around 1%. When you rely on AI to do all the heavy lifting of your ideation that is coming up with your ideas, your human critical thinking muscles atrophy. If you drop a shiny new AI on top of a broken business process, you know what you get? Faster execution of bad business ideas. AI is not a substitute for human resilience, independent analysis, or a custom curated strategy. It is an engine. Welcome back to another episode of The Buck Stops Here. I'm your host, David Maples. And as promised, after we gave you all the razzle-dazzle and great stuff about what AI can do in your business over the past couple of episodes, we now are at the point where we have to do a reality check, kind of bring you back to beyond the hype. We're calling this episode The Creativity Tax, Cognitive Decline, and the Illusion of the 1% Return on Investment. Here's the hard truth that I think everyone needs to wrap their head around right now. Everyone is rushing out there right now to integrate AI in their workflows and systems. They're assuming it's an automatic win. And the first time you use AI, it feels almost indistinguishable than magic. It does something that would have taken you a lot of time yourself, and you say, my gosh, everything is going to change now. But the reality on the ground is much more muddied. In many cases, it's much darker. As someone who's been helping companies integrate AI into their systems for the past 2 years, and then despite billions of dollars in enterprise investment, the positive return on investment for small and medium businesses, in particular using AI, is currently hovering somewhere around 1%. 1%. I didn't misspeak, friends. That is exactly what's happening. So the core problem is that we are buying software that isn't paying us back. So instead of building the next generation of business workflows, companies are simply scaling their inefficiencies faster. This is leading to exhausted teams, generic outputs, and quite frankly, massive hidden costs. And we've only started to see the beginning of this. We're about to start that steep hill, and I talked about it a few episodes ago. We are about to see a massive increase in the cost of using AI in our businesses because the subsidies that these venture capitalists have applied to AI over the past several years are about to come to a screeching halt. So the market is basically ignoring all these compounding problems: the attacks on creativity, the return on investment illusion, and AI burnout. Today, we aren't diagnosing the disease. We are giving you exact operational frameworks that I apply on a weekly basis to help cure it. Now, I can give you the roadmap. I can give you the prescription, but if you don't take the medicine, it's not going to help you. And it's time for you to understand that the buck stops here with you, leadership in your business, and it's time to take control of your systems. And we're going to dive right into this with the first problem, as I see it, in what's going on with AI right now. I'm making some pretty bold claims, things that the hype tech bros in Silicon Valley just don't want you to know about. And I want to be very careful here that you understand that I'm not necessarily anti-AI. I am pro-human. So, and I understand that as of June of 2026, your company is still made up of, what's that? Humans, people. They're the only thing that matters. AI is not buying your goods and services. People are buying your goods and services. Now, maybe AI is helping people discover your goods and services, or will in the near future. But ultimately, the last time I checked, they're not the people who are my actual consumers. And why is this important? Because there's a lot of backlash against AI. There's a lot of pushback, and there's a lot of misinformation in the marketplace. And I do not want people to get this twisted. I want people to understand that I care about the people in this industry. I'd like your businesses to be more successful. That's the whole premise of the buck stops here. But at the same time, I want you to understand there are real challenges, and in implementing these systems, I am seeing this happen every single day. And I'm going to go into what I consider one of the biggest. These are 3 massive problems, and no one out there messing with AI right now is really saying any of these things. There might be a few people, but I have a platform here, and I want people to understand what that is. So the reality is that first problem is what I'm calling the tax on creativity, and I'm building this into 2 parts. This is the cognitive decline that's happening to people in real time using these systems and homogenization of the outputs. So the way the machines are trained, they are probabilistic machines. They are predicting the next token or word. Now, I know that some of you out there will put me on, you'll flame me or whatever, because you're like, you're oversimplifying it. That is how these systems work at their most basic level. Even if you're talking about multiple token predictions, etc., they're still the same thing. They are probabilistic. They are not deterministic. And the difference in that is key. That means they can predict, based on all the data they've consumed, what is the next most likely word to appear in the sentence. But they are not deterministic. They cannot tell you what the future is going to be. And a lot of people out there selling you stuff right now would lead you to believe that that's not the case. They do not understand the world. They are not alive. No, they are not conscious. Well, I don't know. That's really a philosophical question. And if y'all want to debate that with me, I'm glad to do that at length. And I think the people out there saying these things are being highly irresponsible at this point in time. What I want you to understand is that we are outsourcing creative thinking and critical thinking to machines. Researchers call it knowledge collapse. When you rely on AI to do all the heavy lifting of your ideation that is coming up with your ideas, your human critical thinking muscles atrophy. Think about it. When you forget how to do something, when you don't do it anymore, it's hard for you to go back and say, I want to do that again. You haven't done it on a regular basis. When you do it on a regular basis, you're kind of building strength. The brain is not necessarily a muscle, but it does require training. And worse, because everyone is using the same underlying foundation models, creative output becomes structurally generic and just frankly middle of the road. You lose the custom kind of, I hate saying the word bespoke. I think AI has ruined the word bespoke. You lose a custom kind of curated high-end edge that actually separates your business from the competition. Now, by the way, as I said in a talk I gave last week, I said, if you're just okay with being marginally okay, if you're just like, hey, we're adequate at our business, then maybe that's fine for you. But I think most of us who get up and strive to put our business best foot forward, we're actually doing that. So now, by the way, this is a heavily researched episode in particular. I went through 6 major articles or major papers, all of which are 30, 60 pages long. And I'm going to kind of lead those out for you. We will put them in the show notes and I'll try to cite to them as well as possible. For any of those people who wrote these papers, I do apologize if I mispronounce your name. So basically, one of the things I want to talk about is what the research says. So there's a 2026 paper out of MIT by Ace Moglu, and they were warning of knowledge collapse. That's basically when AI gives you highly accurate advice, humans stop exerting the mental effort required to learn, and we stop building foundational knowledge, for lack of a better term. You stop learning those basic things. Another paper from UC Berkeley research by Mann in 2026 backs that up. It basically shows that workers are suffering from automation bias. That means instead of independently analyzing something, we're passively accepting the machine's output and allow our problem-solving muscles to kind of atrophy. And by the way, as someone who's using Claude Code on the daily basis, I can't tell you how often it is when you hit number 2 to accept all changes, or 1, you want to take the human out of the loop in it, right? And it's just easier to do it. And because everyone is using the same foundational models. By the way, it's all trained on basically the same data. Nobody has really a different source of data. We trained it on the internet. And there's a 2025 study by Burvar that proves that creative output is becoming structurally generic and middle of the road. That's that probabilistic bell curve. Is that middle of the curve. I've been saying that since I gave talks back in 2024 that was a danger of these systems. Businesses are actively paying to become mediocre or to strive for mediocrity, and they're losing that high-end edge. Now, by the way, if it is able to output something better than the people in your organization, I understand why that seems magical. Oh, I don't have to hire the marketing agents anymore. I don't need to hire these strategy people. It's generally not outperforming the strategists when you're talking about outside of the middle of the bell curve ideas. Remember, if it's middle of the bell curve, when we use strategy, we use the models to tell us what it predicts we should do or to tell our clients to do. And we don't pitch that because we think in most cases that's just obvious. Sometimes the obvious advice is good advice, right? I mean, it's like if you're having trouble, with weight or whatever it is, you should be like, an obvious thing to do is you need to exercise more. You need to eat less. Those are obvious things. What is maybe a little more complicated is all the things that maybe aren't necessarily obvious. Maybe you don't necessarily connect to getting a full night's sleep with your circadian rhythm. I mean, all these things are valid. Stress hormones make you process things differently. They make you become more resistant to insulin. All these things could be factor into your health and your weight loss plan, but they're not necessarily obvious. And the machines are not necessarily giving those answers. So here are 3 ways I have to combat these problems that are happening right now. The human first brainstorming loop, whatever it is, flip the standard workflow. So a lot of people out there right now are like, use AI to brainstorm. No, absolutely not. I think you should not be using AI as your first step in brainstorming. I think that is absolutely an insane and terrible idea, because the great ideas that lead you not to get in that middle of the bell curve are things that come out right at the beginning. We've always talked about this as somebody who ran a creative agency for 2 decades. We always talked about the problem with in that room, it becomes, if we're all just sharing the same information in the brainstorming, it becomes the one person. We're actually do better when we go off on our own and brainstorm individually and then bring all our ideas, because we're not self-censoring. And that's what happens when you're using an AI. It comes up with 10 ideas without you lifting a finger. Well, the problem with it is, that's all it came up with is 10 ideas. You could have come up with 130 ideas on your own. And yes, if the cognitive work is difficult, that is because it is valuable. It is because you get to go in there and think about these problems or processes. You get to take everything you know from all your human experiences and you can put it in there. That is my first step. Have your human team brainstorm the initial concepts, core hooks, and unique angles first, every single time. Once the humans set that creative direction, you feed those raw ideas into AI to help scale, iterate, and maybe build variations. And then you don't stop there. You use that and you iterate it on it again as the humans, because good ideas there will come up more. And I guarantee you that is a much more efficient and better way to brainstorm. And if you do that with the machines, you're going to help break out of that homogeneity, that regression towards the mean. Basically, you're not saying the same crap as everybody else. Number 2, what I consider the blank page protocol. This is, I think AI is strictly a crowbar to help with writer's block. If you're having a bad day, maybe do it. If a team member's stuck staring at a blank page or you can't come up with anything, use the AI to generate a terrible first draft or generate a list of ideas to react against. Once you break that inertia, shut the AI off. And number 3 is the analog sandbox. Do not constrict yourself to working within screens. Deliberately mandate in your organization that high-level strategy and creative baseline sessions are entirely analog. Use whiteboards. There's a reason why a white sheet of paper, a blank sheet of paper, can be anything. No screens, no prompts. Force your brain to exercise problem-solving faculties to help maintain long-term cognitive sharpness. And I think there's some easy tests you can see if you're doing this. I had a friend of mine the other day, and they were using AI to figure out how to respond to a tricky problem they've been having with a manager. And they'd been going back and forth with the AI every single time. And then all of a sudden there was a response they had to respond to. And literally I'm talking to this friend of mine, and he says, oh gosh, I need to log into this AI right now and see what it thinks I should do to handle this. And I looked at them, I raised an eyebrow, and I said, you can't be serious. What would you have done before AI? You knew how to respond to this, and it was not a hard question. It's just that they were cognitively relying on the AI to handle all that heavy lifting. It wasn't even heavy lifting, it was lightweight lifting. Think about how much authority and autonomy you as a human being have just ceded to a machine who has no context. And by the way, it has no feelings. No matter what sycophantic answer it gives you, it doesn't care what happens to you. There's no feelings there. And I think that is something you as a human need to be very comfortable with and understand. And in your business, that's important. It will say things all the time like, that's a brilliant idea. Was it really a brilliant idea? I leave you to answer that. The next problem I'm seeing is what I'm considering, I'm calling it the return on investment illusion. And I think this is going to get a lot nastier in the next few months. So what we're seeing is that businesses are treating AI like it's like an IT, I don't know, it's like checking a box. It's like a procurement purpose. It's like, oh, I bought this thing and it will now solve everything that ails me. Instead of thinking about it's a workflow redesign. If you drop a shiny new AI on top of a broken business process, you know what you get? Faster execution of bad business ideas. That's what you get. And furthermore, companies are bottlenecking the AI, requiring humans to review every single generated word, or letting it run wild, which gives you massive intellectual property and cybersecurity risks. So what you have here is you have 2 areas. It's either bottlenecked on one end or it can run wild. And I think you have to start thinking about this from, in Silicon Valley, they talk about first principles. Like, how would you build this again from the thing? Let me gloss this with the actual research. So basically, there's a paper, 2026 Enterprise of AI Playbook. It's out of Stanford, and it found that 77% of the AI implementation challenges have nothing to do with the technology itself. And it just turns out that illustrates that the technology is necessarily not the problem. It's how you're executing that process. There's another article, by McClure and Gerdow. It's a 2026 article. We'll link to it in the show notes. It showed that only 6% of all firms report significant earnings impacts from AI. Why? Because 84% of AI deployment failures are organizational, which means you have misaligned incentives, you have a lack of governance, and you have poor workflow design. And the danger of extremes is the third part we're seeing in this, because the fact is the companies are, as I said, either bottlenecking it by making people do every piece of it or letting it run wild. And the idea with it is usually it's like, it's like the Goldilocks and the Three Bears. It's like, too hot, too cold, just right. The answer is probably somewhere in the middle. And I guarantee you for 90% of businesses, if I walked in today, I could probably drop that on a board and get a whole bunch of people just nodding their heads. So basically, let's go with the first one, what I call the human firewall model. See, you don't have to babysit every single token that AI generates. Instead, you want to have the AI operate in a kind of a sandboxed environment. That means an environment where it can't break everything in your system. And you're positioned at somewhere near the end of the pipeline. I think that's a more valuable way to do it. The human ends up being the ultimate firewall in the entire process. This is getting that bottleneck thing I illustrated one of the points. Everything, the final output, the human acts as the firewall on that, but they're not reviewing every single token that comes out. As long as it's sandboxed, you can measure it at the outputs and see what's happening. But you need a human to have the ability to go in and do that. If you're enjoying the show, please help us not keep it a secret. Subscribe, rate us a 5 stars, and help us keep the lights on and keep the message going. Whether you're on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever else you're enjoying us, your support really does matter. If you've got a story or a resource we missed, please tell us in the comments. We would love to hear from you. Now, back to the show. The next piece I'm going to talk about is what I'm considering workflow first, not technology first. Before you implement a new technology, you have to say, how should this works? You not to never, ever, ever deploy AI simply to, well, we have AI in this. I mean, I can't think about every piece of software I've seen in the past year that slapped a little sparkly little icon on there and like, now includes AI. And I mean, it reminds me of like what they used to say commercials back in the 50s where it's like, now includes Particle X. Particle X makes it better. Part of your regularly balanced breakfast. Nobody knew what it was. The idea with just adding in Agent X, insert AI for that, it doesn't work. You need to identify specific operational bottlenecks. Go back and watch my episode on efficiency AI. You want to figure out the tasks that you're trying to speed up. And if AI deployment can't be tied directly to a key performance indicator, in the industry we call these KPIs, for example, something like reduce client onboarding time or reduce time to proposals for clients by 50%, whatever it is. It needs to be something you can measure it. And unless it can tell you that it can do that, you don't fund it. And then you have to track how much it costs. The value in this is you stop bleeding a cash into vanity tech products. And by the way, I've been guilty of this myself. I've built some things just because I could, and then I got done with it. And I was like, oh, it would have been better off if we just built the presentation the way we used to build them. This way, you don't make sure you're scaling inefficiencies instead of fixing them. You need to fix the inefficiencies. And a lot of people talk about being AI native or come at this from an AI first standpoint. I think you have to kind of know the way things worked before and just do the what if, like, how could I do this? And you want to look, instead of using it for every single part of it, again, break it into tasks. Say this task would be great in AI, but instead of trying to say the AI can take this from A to Z, maybe you just take a part of the task that uses up a ton of time. Maybe you take the part of it that people really hate doing. Maybe it's data entry and whatever it is. There's a lot of ways to do it. The third one of this is what I'm considering what is called human on the loop. And this is instead of giving AI a task and waiting to approve it, you give AI autonomy within strict predefined constraints. Now, by the way, this isn't different than anything I've said before. And this is about the guardrails. Look at our other episodes on AI governance. And, you can draft and send these follow-up emails, but flag anything that mentions a contract dispute to the manager. By the way, that's something I said you could do. That's a more aggressive standpoint. For me, the way I'm actually doing is I want an easy way for my people to go through them and look at them and see what's going on with it. But this way, if you do this, the value to your organization is it balances the speed of the automation with the safety of human oversight. And it allows the AI to actually generate return on investment on kind of lower tier tasks, for lack of a better term. The last one I want to go into is a real problem. And actually, all of these are real problems. But this is what I'm calling AI burnout or brain fry. So AI was sold as a massive time savers, but instead, for many workers, it has created an exhausting new layer of digital bureaucracy. And by the way, what do we hate at the buck stops here? It's bureaucracy for bureaucracy's sake. That should not exist. I mean, why do we give ourselves a set of handcuffs with it that make our people, the humans actually involved in the jobs, less happy with what they're doing? So AI often replaces execution with supervision. And it turns out that supervision can be a lot more cognitively taxing. The increased cognitive load of continually prompting, monitoring, and catching AI hallucinations is leading directly to brain fry and severe decision fatigue. So the research on this, Harvard Business Review had an article called Brain Fry. I mean, it's on point, just in 2026. And they coined the AI term AI brain fry. I think that was kind of obvious, but they came up with it and said it first, I guess. We have not eliminated work. We've replaced execution with supervision. I said that earlier. It bears repeating. We've replaced execution with supervision. The intense cognitive load of constantly doing these things is causing decision fatigue. The same Harvard Business Review article found that when workers are forced to juggle 4 or more AI tools simultaneously, and by the way, your mileage may vary. I've said that on the podcast, haven't said it in a couple of years, but I think it's important you to know. You might be able to juggle 7 effectively, but the average number of workers is if you're forced to juggle more than 3, productivity actually crashes through the floor due to the mental tax of context switching. We talked about in one of the previous episodes from a couple seasons back, we talked about context switching, how if we interrupt your work process and make you switch things, there's this whole ramp up period you have to get back to get it back in place. And then additive workloads is the third one, which I really want to shame business owners not doing. So the article on this one is called AI Fatigue and Mental Health Implications, a comprehensive literature review, Quality in Sport by Sosinski. And he concluded that AI is adding new tasks to employees' plates without removing legacy work. So, and it's directly harming mental health. I'm asking you to do new, harder things that are more mentally taxing. And at the same time, I'm not taking anything off your plate. Eat it all while I sit here and watch. And it's crazy. So here's my menu of solutions to kind of look at these things. Number one, I'm going to do this one because it's the easiest. I'm going to say eliminate tool sprawl. So 4 or more AI tools is too much. Context switching kills you. Standardize the tech stack. Bring everything under one unified system or customized middleware so your team isn't constantly switching the user interfaces. By the way, it's a good pitch for Easy Prompter, the only software in the market that allows you to integrate with 37 different AIs. You just choose them right there from your menu. You can set your favorites. You can set your proper 3 tools right then and there. We also have just entered a couple of new exciting modes called brain trust and deep thinking modes, which none of the other AIs have in the marketplace. It utilizes the other AIs, but we're using it in ways they don't have. So if you want to check that out, go to Easy Prompter. I think the next one you have to look at is change job descriptions. Stop asking your employees to be line editors of bad AI copy. You need to empower them to be the system orchestrators who actually command the inputs and then are responsible for evaluating the final outputs. Give them their professional autonomy back. And in some organizations, what they're doing is they're generating AI work slop and they're giving it to the same editorial team who's not getting to edit good work product to start with. And that is a lot harder because what's happening is before your junior copywriters would give work to your senior copywriters or senior editors, and the editors weren't having to look at a junior who's never getting better. The problem with it is editing crap input product is how people start out. You do not want to take work slop and have to spend your time on it. And by the way, it makes you resent the people who sent it to you. So I think there's that one. And the third one I'm going to say is the efficiency dividend. We've talked about how we're going to implement this in Catapult. We need to sit down with our team and talk about it. So if an AI tool saves an employee 10 hours a week, do not punish them by giving those 10 hours with more AI supervision. You must allow the efficiency gains to result an actual breathing room, or you will burn out your top performing performers faster than ever before. And in the talk I gave last week in Illinois, I had a person from the audience talk about this in particular. He works for a chain. I won't say what it is. I'm actually going to give that talk in a follow-up episode to this as kind of a cherry on top. I'm actually going to give you as kind of a webinar our tools to analyze efficiency and opportunity in your organization. And if you're interested from this episode, let us know, and we'd be glad to invite people to like a live recording. We actually could make that a webinar where we actually walk people through what we did. But in the audience, someone said in their organization, it's basically automating all this stuff. And then every 2 weeks, he has to go in and clean all the crap out it's generating. And I asked him, and so basically it's 10 hours of work savings, but he has to go spend an entire afternoon every 2 weeks, which is much more mentally taxing. And he hates this event being on his calendar. It's making him hate his job. You've basically taken 10 hours of work, reduced it to 5 or 6, but made the 5 or 6 hours you have to put in much, much, much harder. And that is a massive problem. And that is going to lead to burnout very quickly. And this person is a manager at a location responsible for a lot of things. And I think he's starting to hate his job. But it was a gift from the audience, and it happened. So I think that's really where I would be at from there. So those are the 3 things I'd really like people to understand about AI, is that there is absolutely, and I've got articles that support this, that back this up. I have another 10 articles I could talk about it, that we are literally seeing more homogenized or average results from the AI. There's less creative thinking. We're seeing this in college students coming out of schools. We're seeing that happen. There's definitely a creativity tax that's happening. We're getting less creative, less great results for humans. We are seeing massive cognitive decline things on the other side. We're forgetting to sharpen our saw. We're forgetting to make the tools better, to make ourselves better in the process. The next one is the ROI illusion. I do think you need a third-party outside integrator. I do not believe at this point, and we just saw it from OpenAI and Anthropic, they are putting integrator sales positions in the market to help organizations integrate that. I think that's partly lock into their tools, but I think at the same time, they recognize that internal to companies internally cannot, in most cases, otherwise we'd be seeing a lot more than 1%. They're too close to the problem. They don't understand what the tools can do, and they're trying to solve these things on their own, and they're being wildly unsuccessful with it. And the last one I really want to worry about you is AI burnout. Because at the end of the day, this podcast is a human podcast. It's about businesses that are made up of people. And the last thing you want to do is burn those resources out, because they're going to hate you and they'll always talk about you badly 10 years later down the road online to whatever platform is bigger than TikTok at that point. So final points on this. AI is not a substitute for human resilience, independent analysis, or a custom curated strategy. It is an engine. And if you don't build the track to put that train on and steer the machine, it will run you and your team right over. So I'd like you to look at your tech stack this week. Are you building workflows? Or are you just playing with toys? That's all I've got for you on the Buck Stops here this week. I hope you found this episode informative and educational. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us 5 stars, thumbs up, share it with a friend, and just let people out there know how this is important in your workflow, in your company. Drop us a link in the comments. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd be glad to respond to you. Again, my name's David Maples. Thank you for joining us on the Buck Stops here. Go out there, be well, do some good work, and kick some butt.